And then, without a word, he approached, closing the declivity between us. While avoiding my eyes, I noticed that his dick was obvious from the face of his pants. I don't know why, but I grabbed it directly by hand. It won't hurt, but I'll squeeze it lustily. He quickly unbuckled his belt, pulled down his pants and placed me on the dining table, making me look small. Grasped the tool and drink from mine. At first he walked slowly back and forth in it. After that, our pace accelerated to enjoying it as well. He was shaking the wine glasses of our members. He was smothering kisses on my neck. Our friends were at one with lust. It was in the mouths of our tongues. I didn't care who he was at that moment, we were both like two strangers enjoying one of us. Then his studies increased. I realized that you would come and I said, inside me. He entered into me with great enthusiasm. He was in hot drops, thinking. He drew back and took a deep breath. Me too. Oh, hi. Were you here? I was just telling you what we've been through. Let me start from the beginning so that you can find out how things developed. My name is Mary. I am 54 years old, I have been widowed for the last 2 summers. My late husband, Alfred, was not exactly the man of my dreams. I know it sounds cruel, but let's be real, he was a difficult man, stuck in his ways and suffered from his own disappointments for years. It wasn't bad, just, I'm tired of life. When he passed, to be honest, our marriage was more about duty than love. After he died, I thought that part of my life was closed. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone. I spent my days tending to my small garden, knitting in the evenings and keeping up with the usual family gatherings. Then Liam came. Liam is my late husband's grandfather from his first marriage. She is 27 years old, she is tall, she has these piercing green eyes and this quiet intensity about her. When he visited as a child, he was always polite but distant. Nevertheless, he came to stay for a few weeks that summer. It was suggested to be a simple visit, a break from her life in the city to spend time with her family in the countryside. The first few days passed without incident. Liam mostly kept to himself, exploring the nearby forests or reading books on the porch. I found myself watching him from the kitchen window, not in a strange way, just observing. There was something different about him, something I couldn't even put my finger on. There was a sadness about him, as if he were searching for something he could not name. It started innocently enough. One afternoon, I was struggling with an old wooden fence that needed to be repaired. Liam offered to help. He didn't say much, he just picked up the tools and got to work. Watching him reminded me of a younger Alfred, strong, focused, determined. But where Alfred was always grumpy and distant, Liam was kind and attentive. As the days turned into weeks, we started spending more and more time together. He would sit on the porch with me in the evenings, sipping his tea as the sun sank below the horizon. We would talk about everything and nothing, her plans, my memories, the little things that make up a life. There was a comfort in his presence, a connection I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, I decided to clean the attic, an area that had not been touched since Alfred's death. Dust was floating in the sun's rays as I sorted the old boxes. Liam appeared at the door, his shirt sticking to his skin from the summer heat. He offered to help, and before I could protest he was at my side, lifting a heavy chest as if it had no weight. We found a box of old photos and I couldn't stop smiling as I showed him pictures from my younger years. Brushing the edges of the prints with his fingers, he examined them carefully. "You are so beautiful," she said. When he looked up, his eyes held something I couldn't decipher, a mixture of curiosity, longing and something deeper. The air between us grew heavy, thick decked with unspoken words. Then suddenly he placed a slow but effective kiss on my lip. This was wrong, I reflexively pulled myself back. But did I want this? I don't know. This time he will have noticed my indecision, which he stuck hard to my lips. As if I had been waiting for this, I returned that kiss. We were kissing with great horny. We kissed for about 5 minutes and he took the first step. He started rubbing his hand against mine. I had a cream-colored dress on top and tan pantyhose under me. With his other hand, he started touching my skin with soft touches on my socks, starting with my feet. When I started climbing, the movements inside me were turning into moaning sounds from my mouth. When he heard my moans, he didn't want to prolong it any longer and took off my dress and tore my pantyhose right down the middle in one move. He took off my white lace underwear and began to investigate with his index finger. I was betraying Alfred and his grandson. When he realized that I was trying to pull myself back, he forced his finger inside me. After the pleasure I got at that moment, this idea was replaced by a great desire. I told him to do it faster. It got faster and faster and faster, until he let out a scream of delight that engulfed the whole house. I stood my ground as if nothing had happened and arranged my dress. When I got up from the ground, I noticed the wetness of its wood. It wasn't sweat, I was drained. Later that evening, as I was preparing dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling of his gaze on me. He sat at the kitchen table, his fingers tracing patterns on the wood. When I turned, our eyes met and it was as if the room was decked. I dropped the knife I was holding and he ran to help. His hand covered mine as he pinned me down, his touch lasted only a second too long. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. I nodded, pulled my hand away and made myself with vegetables. But I wasn't okay. Something was moving inside me, something I couldn't name. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer, he just stood there, his expression unreadable. And then, without a word, he approached, closing the declivity between us. While avoiding my eyes, I noticed that his dick was obvious from the face of his pants. I don't know why, but I grabbed it directly by hand. "It won't hurt, but I'll squeeze it lustily." He quickly unbuckled his belt, pulled down his pants and placed me on the dining table, making me look small. Grasped the tool and drink from mine. At first he walked slowly back and forth in it. After that, our pace accelerated to enjoying it as well. He was shaking the wine glasses of our members. He was smothering kisses on my neck. Our friends were at one with lust. It was in the mouths of our tongues. I didn't care who he was at that moment, we were both like two strangers enjoying one of us. Then his studies increased. I realized that you would come and I said, inside me. He entered into me with great enthusiasm. He was in hot drops, thinking. He drew back and took a deep breath. Me too. The morning light was soft, seeping through the curtains like a gentle reminder of everything that had happened. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind tangled in thoughts. I could hear Liam moving quietly across the room, the sound of his boots scuffing against the floor. When I turned my head, I saw him sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to me. His broad shoulders were tense, and his bag was already packed, sitting by the door. My chest tightened. "You're leaving?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his hands pausing as he tied his laces. He didn't turn around. "I think I should," he said softly. I sat up slowly, the sheet pulling around my waist. My throat was dry, but I managed to ask, "Why?" He finally turned to face me. His green eyes, always so intense, looked softer now. Sadder. "Mary, you know why," he said, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. "This can't last. It's not right, and you said so yourself." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Yes, I had said that. Last night, I had tried to convince both of us that this wasn't something we could keep doing. But now, with him standing there ready to leave, I wasn't so sure. "But what if I don't want you to go?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. He froze, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. Then, he crossed the room, kneeling in front of me so we were face to face. "Mary," he said, his voice breaking just enough to let me know this was as hard for him as it was for me. "I care about you. More than I should. But this isn't fair to you, or to me. It's going to hurt both of us in the end. I reached out, my fingers brushing against his cheek. "It already hurts," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I thought I was done feeling this way, Liam. I thought that part of me was gone, but you brought it back. You made me feel alive again." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch for the briefest moment before taking my hand in his. His warmth grounded me, even as his words cut through me. "You've made me feel things I didn't know I could," he said. "But staying here, letting this go on, it will only make it harder for both of us." I nodded, even as tears welled up in my eyes. I knew he was right, but that didn't make it any easier. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "You're just going to walk away?" He stood, his movements slow and deliberate, like he was fighting every instinct to stay. He grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulder, pausing at the door. "I'll go," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "But Mary, if you ever need me, you know where to find me." And just like that, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and I felt the weight of the silence settle over the room. I stayed there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he had just been. The house felt so much quieter now, so much emptier. But as I sat there, something unexpected began to stir inside me. Yes, Liam had left, and yes, it hurt more than I wanted to admit. But he had also left me with something else, a reminder of who I was, of what I could still feel, still want. I got up and walked to the window, watching him disappear down the path toward the forest. My hand pressed against the glass, and a bittersweet smile tugged at my lips. "Goodbye, Liam," I whispered. "And thank you." In that moment, I knew I would carry this with me, this brief, impossible connection that had changed me in ways I couldn't fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.